We're going to continue tonight in our study of the parables. The parables are the stories that Jesus tells. Stories that have a point, designed to teach something. A parable was often used to communicate a truth that some would understand and some would not understand along the way. So we've been studying these parables, and last time we were together, we looked at the start of Luke chapter 15, where Jesus is telling two interrelated stories about things that were lost, the diligent search to find that which was lost, and then the celebration that erupts when that which was lost is then found. In verse 3 of chapter 15, Jesus says, so Jesus, told them this parable. Notice, as I mentioned last time, it says parable, singular, and then proceeds to tell three stories. Luke 15 is this bringing together of three interrelated stories that together form a single parable. And so as we come to the story tonight, what we should expect is we're going to expect to find another lost thing. Only tonight, it's not something that is lost. It's someone that is lost. And last time we were together, I used as an illustration this enduring story from literature about that focuses a lot on lost things, and that is the story of Peter Pan. And what are the boys that in Neverland called? The Lost Boys. That's just one of the several examples of things that are lost in the lore of Peter Pan. But Peter Pan is inspired a variety of songs and offshoots. One of those is a song called Lost Boys by Ruth B. Rachel's so excited that I'm referencing this song. But the chorus of the song says, Neverland is home for lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free. Now, it's a sweet song about orphan kids finding a place from their loneliness, finding a place to belong. But there's a sad irony to that song. And the sad irony is that lost things can never truly be free. And we're going to see that as we read tonight about a lost person, this lost son who had the illusion of freedom, but it was only ever an illusion. So with that, we're going to take a look at Luke chapter 15, and we're going to be starting in verse 11. Luke 15, starting in verse 11. And he said, there was a man who had two sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, he saw him and his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate it. For this, my son, was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of his servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you, and I had never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Lord, this is your word. We thank you for this story. We ask right now that the meaning of the story would be imprinted on our hearts, and that we who are lost would be found in the Father's love. Amen. As I mentioned, this is a threefold parable. 3 stories that come together to form a single parable about things lost, things searched for, things celebrated when they're found. And he started by telling a story of 1 in 100 sheep that was lost. And then 1 in 10 coins that was lost. And then here we are down to 2 sons. Now the story is often referred to as the prodigal son, and with some good reason to it. But I want to suggest to us tonight that it is not just the one son that was lost, but both sons who were lost. One son was lost in leaving. One son was lost even in staying. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at the lost son who left, and next time we're together, we'll look at the lost son who stayed. So here's the story. Jesus just finished telling the story about the sheep, and then about the coin, and immediately goes into this story and says there's a dad who has 2 kids. And the younger of the 2 sons goes to dad and says, I want my inheritance. Now make no mistake, inheritances are given at the passing of the person, right? So to go and to say, I want my inheritance, is to say, Dad, you are dead to me. And the only thing that you are good for is the money that I'm entitled to. That's what this son is saying to his dad in asking for this inheritance. But notice the response of the father here. He doesn't argue. He doesn't protest. He simply goes and liquidates assets and gives the money to his son. But let me be clear. To say that it was simple does not mean it was easy. In fact, it was very, very costly. Without kind of going all the way down to Greek word study, the short is the way that Jesus tells the story has the idea of an estate, and part of the estate needing to be sold, not of the more typical word for inheritance. So this was not a case where dad went to the bank and took a withdrawal or had to sell off some stocks. This was, he had to go and sell some of the family lands. The cost, not only in the process of selling off some of the family land, but in so doing, the family's estate just got smaller, and all future earnings potential just decreased. All future profit potential just decreased. But the father never argues, never protests, does that, gives the money, and then, with deep sadness, he watches his son walk down the road and leave. Verse 13 goes to tell us that the son, when he left, went to a far country. So this wasn't he went to the next town over. This wasn't that he went like he went away for the weekend. He was actively, intentionally going to a far country. He was trying to go where nobody would know the family name, where there'd be no reputation, but he'd walk in with all this money, and it tells us he went and squandered it in reckless living. We don't know exactly, Jesus doesn't tell us what exactly he did in squandering it, but he goes and he squanders all of this money. We can use our imaginations to. He wanted the next momentary pleasure. He wanted to keep the party rolling. And as long as the money's there, the party kept coming. The crowds are gathered around him. The girls would come. The booze is flowing. All of these things are happening as long. I was thinking about this. I don't know if anybody's ever quoted Zac Brown Band in a sermon about this passage before, but in his song, Zac Brown Band in the song Toes captures this when he says, "And the senoritas don't care when there's no more dinero. Yeah, I've got no money to stay." That's what happened here to this son. As long as the money was there, the party would keep going. But as soon as the money ran out, the party came to a screeching halt and everybody bailed. And unfortunately for him, that's when the famine shows up. So he's got no money, completely broke. And now he's stuck in the middle of a severe famine. So he does the only thing that he can do in that moment. He goes and gets a job. Unfortunately, it's at the lowest of the low of the low of the low jobs, and that is feeding pigs. And if we want to get an idea of how bad of straits he was in, it tells us in the story that he was looking at the pig's food and wishing he could eat that, and still got nothing. But it is there, at that lowest of spots, that he starts to do some internal hard heart work. How did I get to this spot? And it occurs to him that back at his father's house, even the servants have food. He's desperate to eat a little bit of the pig's food, but even the servants at his father's house have more food than they can eat. So he kind of makes up his mind that he's gonna go back home, but he's gonna go back home and he's going to say, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of the hired servants." Now remember, he's going to a far-off country. He went far away. So he's got a long journey back. And I should imagine that most of that journey is him running those words over and over again, trying to make sure he can get it right. "Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Father, I'm not worthy to be called..." I can't even get the words. That's why I got to keep practicing over. Like this stumbling, trying to make sure you get it right. "Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." And then, as he starts to get closer to town, he's run through this, has rehearsed his speech over and over again. He's starting to get close to home. And now the head is sinking. Because now the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment is washing over him. Because now, the closer he gets to home, the more their people in town might recognize him. And know that he's the guy who gave up his sonship in this father's house to run away with the money, to leave. And so he's walking with his head down, slowly running it over, and his speech over and over again in his head. And I think it's a little a shame because then he misses what happens in verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. See, the father watched his son walk down that road with all the money and leave. And every morning since, he looked down that road hoping that that would be the day that he'd see his son walking home. Day after day, week after week, month after month, looking down that road, hoping, would today be the day? And now here it is, that day is now this day. The father is looking down the road. There he is. He would know that walk anywhere. His son's walking down the road, and he takes off running to him. And he gets to him and gives him this big giant bear hug. Starts to kiss him. The son now is going to go into his rehearsed speech. "Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm not worthy to be called your son. But notice, he never gets to the last part of his or her speech about being a servant. Because once we're wrapped in the love of the Father, there's no place left for being a servant, only for being a son. The father turns to his servants and said, quickly, go, get him a robe, get him a ring, get him some shoes, and come out here. And they come, and they put the robe on him, they put a ring on his finger, and they put shoes on his feet. And with that, he has declared that you are my son. Servants go barefoot, sons have shoes. And he sends and says, go kill the fattened calf. Let's have a party. Verse 23 and 24. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now I want us to consider the nature of the relationship between this lost son and his father. And I want to propose two questions to help us do that real quickly. Two questions that have been really useful in my own life. For all that he gained, what did he lose? For all that he lost, what did he gain? So let's look at those questions. First, for all that he gained, what did he lose? What did he gain, first of all, in leaving? Well, he gained some money, probably a pretty good amount of money, some popularity, notoriety, sex, the illusion of freedom. But it did come at a cost. What did he lose to gain those things? He lost his relationship with his father. Even more, he lost his relationship with his whole family, his home, his connections. He lost his identity as a son. Now let's look the other direction. In returning, for all that he lost, what did he gain? Well, in returning, what did he lose? Well, he'd already lost all the money. It was all gone. And the things that had come with it, the whole party that had followed. He lost his pride. When you're wishing that you could eat the pig's food, the pride is going to get worked on. The arrogance, the entitlement. But what did he gain in returning? He gained his home. He gained a robe and jewelry and shoes. He gained the Father. He gained the Father's love. He gained his identity as a son. Now quickly, I'd like to do two things to help us to apply this story. The first is to kind of look at those questions in our own lives, and then the second to look at our own relationship with the Father. I use those questions. They were shared with me several years ago now. For all that you've lost, what have you gained? For all that you've gained, what have you lost? I'd encourage you, maybe even this week, take a notebook and kind of jot down those questions and think how in your own life. Maybe it's a tool, because most of us really struggle to do the hard heart work. Most of us struggle to look at the man in the mirror with a whole lot of honesty. And those questions have really helped me, and I propose them. Maybe they would help you to do that. For all that you've lost, what have you gained? And there's times where things go really awry. that things don't turn out the way that you were expecting them to. A lost innocence, a lost job, a lost love. And we kind of live in the weight of the grief and the gravity of that which we've lost. But I think there's an opportunity to ask, when we've lost those things, what have we gained? How have you seen God forming your character through those losses in a way that you might not have if you hadn't experienced that loss? How have you experienced the provision and the kindness and the mercy and the compassion of God in ways that you might not have if you had not experienced that loss? There's gain even in that. Now, and then the flip side, for all that you've gained, what have you lost? Sometimes things go really well, and yet it somehow feels off, and we can't always put our finger on why. You got that promotion, and you gained that, and yet you kind of are left wondering, what if? What if this had happened? What if I'd have done this instead? And the feeling of the loss there. Or a move that you're excited about, but one of the effects is a lost friendship that you had valued. There's space to grieve that which is lost, even in celebrating the things that you've gained through that. So I share that as maybe a tool that you could use to look in your own life and help evaluate in your own heart what you've gained and what you've lost, and be able to look and see that maybe God has met you in ways that you've never thought about in the midst of that. But the other is to then look at the nature of our own relationships with the Father. After all, the point of the story is a lost son who left his father, and an invitation for us to then look and see ourselves in it. One of the great things in this story is the picture of reversal. Remember, the story starts with the son saying, "Dad, you are figuratively, symbolically dead to me." But what does the father say when the son comes home? My son was dead and is now alive. You got this reversal from the son thinking the father was the one who was dead to him, to finding out that the son is the one who was dead and is made alive back again before the father. See, the journey of the son here, this lost son, is all of our journeys. We are the wayward, wandering ones. We are the ones who left. That may be different and have looked different in each of our own lives. The ways that we have left God may look different for each of us. But every one of us has done that. Every one of us has left the Father. The son's journey is our journey as well. But the son's story can also be our story. The story where he was dead and now is alive. He was lost and now is found. That can be your story and my story as well. The story of a father who never gives up pursuing his children. I tell the story with Kim's permission. It's an important caveat to give as a pastor sometimes. But for her, part of the college selection journey, she grew up in a church family and made the decision that she was going to go to college away from God. Choosing college was her going to the far country. The college scholarship was great, but when she left to go to the flatlands of New York, it was an attempt to leave God. And yet, what did she find? I'm so grateful for Mike and Meg Foster, dear friends of ours. Because when she thought she was going from God, God had provided loving, caring people who are going to bring her back to the Father's love, who are going to point her back. See, that's the point. The never-ending, never-stopping, unbreaking, always and forever love of God cannot be outrun. You cannot leave it. You cannot go far enough away. That far country, it cannot be far enough that it is outside the reach of the Father. The Father longs to welcome you home, to bring you in, give you that big bear hug embrace, and call you his son and bring you into his family once again. And he can do that not because of your merit. He does that not because you got it right. No, you and me, we were the ones who left. But he does it because Jesus was the perfect son. Jesus left the Father not out of reckless rebellion, but out of compassion to go on a rescue mission. Jesus did not squander the Father's wealth, but he spent his life giving of himself, even to the point of giving his life by dying a criminal's death on the cross. Jesus did not wallow in the pig pen, but he took the heinous stench of sin upon himself, the sin of the whole world. He took it upon himself on that cross. And Jesus didn't just symbolically, figuratively die. He really, literally, actually, physically died. And by his death, he became the substitute for you and for me, who did deserve that because we were the ones who left the Father. And by his resurrection, he conquered death and invites us back into the family of God. So that the Father looks at you as he looked at the Son in a big embrace and says, "You are my son. You've been forgiven, adopted as sons, forever in the family of God, because you were brought in by Jesus Christ, the perfect Son." Let's pray. Jesus, you are the perfect Son. We confess that we are not. We ran, we left, we continue to try and walk away. But we thank you that there is no country far enough that we could get to, that we would be outside of the Father's love, outside the Father's embrace. Thank you that we who are lost have been found. We who were dead have been made alive. That we have been called sons, children, co-heirs with Christ. And for that, you deserve all the praise and all the glory, because you are the one who came and found us when we were lost. Amen. We come